Good evening, everyone. This is Paul Kagabine at the Garland County Library, and I'm here today with our guest presenter, Ms. Cheryl Batts. Cheryl is here this evening to present about the local icon, John Lee Webb, who played an essential role in building the culture and history of the African American community here in Hot Springs. Ms. Batts is the author of a book about John Lee Webb entitled John Lee Webb, The Man and His Legacy, which was given the prestigious Ned Shank Award for preservation publication by the Historic Preservation Alliance of Arkansas. So she's here to talk all about the impact of the man who inspired that book, John Lee Webb. And so she'll tell us about him here shortly, but first I want to introduce her. And in addition to being an author, Ms. Batts is also notably the CEO and founder of a preservation project here in Hot Springs called P.H.O.E.B.E, which stands for People Helping Others Excel by Example. And hopefully she'll share a little bit more about that with us tonight as well. But first of all, Ms. Batts was born here in Hot Springs, Arkansas, in an area that is now the National Historic Register listed Pleasant Street Historic District. She was educated in several states before receiving a BA in nonprofit management from Columbia College in Chicago. And according to her, the year that Ms. Batts moved back to Hot Springs was the year that changed her life. The tree-lined streets, well-kept homes with basket-weave sidewalks had disappeared on Pleasant Street, and Malvern Avenue had no Black businesses, not one. The comfort of seeing doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, business owners was gone. What had happened to this once flourishing area? It was that question that set her on a quest that would lead to preservation as social justice. Knowing your history was empowerment. The history and culture of a people are connected to economic and community development. These powerful thoughts and ambitions came later after a talk with her mother about what happened and how could she find out the real story. The decision was to honor the senior citizens of the community. They are never really honored, she said, and so that's what she set out to do. The oral histories from these seasoned warriors and working with through these seasoned warriors and working through with youth through the Uzuri Project Youth Institute. This has led her on a treasure trove of oral histories on film, letters, photographs, clothing, the recognition of the Pleasant Street National Historic District, and most recently, the recognition of the largest number of Green Book destinations within the district. And adding to this impressive list, she became an author to a book about the man who we're here to talk about tonight, John Lee Webb, The Man and His Legacy. And so she's going to share with us everything about this and the people he knew and why this area is so important. So if you're watching live and you have any comments or questions at all for Ms. Cheryl Batts, please share them to be read later in this program. And for now, I'm going to turn it over to her. So thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here tonight. It always is good to be able to talk about my passion. And my passion is Hot Springs, Arkansas, and the cosmopolitan attitude that we had as far as race was concerned. It was something that a book should have been written about. And it was. It lies in the pages of John Lee Webb, The Man and His Legacy. And you'll see as I share with you a few pages from the book and information about Mr. Webb that he was a man that had friends from all over. These friends and people that he shared his life with ranged. They were Black, they were white. He traveled around the country. He was not a man that was just stationary right here, in Hot Springs, Arkansas. He was born and raised in a little place outside of Tuskegee, Alabama, and traveled after he decided he was going to go to school. I'll tell you a little bit more about him and his siblings as we begin our PowerPoint presentation. And the reason I want to do that is because I can get excited, I can get carried away, and still you'll never know what was on the PowerPoint presentation. So Paul, let's go. This book, The Winds of Change, John Lee Webb, The Man and His Legacy, was the first book that was published by P.H.O.E.B.E Publishers. We published this book probably in 2012, and we were very excited. The book actually is a takeoff on a book that was written by Sutton E. Griggs, who was born in 1872, died in 1933. And we found out that recently that Mr. Griggs published, I should say, Reverend Griggs. He was of the Baptist denomination, and that'll be very important and significant as we continue with our story about Mr. Webb. He published more novels in book form than any other African American at the turn of the 20th century. So when we found the book, he had authored the book, and it was called Triumph of the Simple Virtues, or the life story of John Lee Webb. And it was written in Hot Springs and published by The Messenger in 1926. And on the side page, you'll see his wife's name, Mrs. John Lee Webb. So we have to assume that Mrs. Webb had a lot to do with the publishing and the putting together of this book, because Mr. Webb was an extremely busy man. And I think that she may have spent quite a bit of time with Reverend Griggs putting that book together. This is a younger picture of the Honorable John Lee Webb, and this is a photo image courtesy of John Bush in Little Rock. I believe that we use this book on the cover of his book because it talks about him from birth in 1923 to about 1926 and 27, and that's the first book. And so I was excited because recently we found a website on Reverend Griggs, and lo and behold, Mr. Webb's book was listed there. And they had a copy of it. But this is something they had that we did not have in the copies that we had. We had gotten 2 copies. One copy was given to us, and another copy was given to us by a senior citizen as we were interviewing them for an oral history. And on the inside front cover of their book, it says, "To a true friend of humanity, to one of the greatest governors Arkansas has ever had, and who is one of the most pleasing orators who has ever graced a platform." And I know that sounds, kind of flowery, but you'll find that in the writings of the books in 1920s and 30s, they're very much like that. I guess flowery is a good word for it. I'm sure there's another one. But then it says, "From your friend, John Lee Webb, 1/10/34. So between the time I found this yesterday afternoon and tonight, I did go to see what governor this must be that he was talking about. And this is the governor at 1934, Junius Marion Futrell, Arkansas's 30th governor. He was governor from 1932 to 1937. So I would have to completely and totally assume that that was who he dedicated that book to and sent it to him. Now, I won't read this whole thing, but right where you see the blue arrow, it says, "During his tenure, the Refunding Act was enacted, the Arkansas Prohibition Act was rescinded, and the State Planning Board was established. Also, the Arkansas Department of Public Welfare was created. The 19th and 20th Amendments to the state constitution were adopted, and gambling measures were enacted to help relieve the state's financial problems." Futrell left office in January 12, 1937, and later served as the attorney for the Dias Colony, Inc. Governor Futrell died on June 10th, 1955, and is buried at the Linwood Cemetery, Paragould, Arkansas. So you can tell from the things that he was able to accomplish, there's quite a bit in there that would have affected the African American colored Negro community. And I'm very sure that was why he sent him the book. Plus, I also think that he was a man that knew how to network. So this original book confirmed, as we read it, that John Lee Webb was the founder in 1924 of the National Baptist Laymen's Auxiliary. Well, okay, that started a whole trend once we got the book written. And it was written not because I wanted to write a book, not because I thought it was a great thing to do, because a friend of mine named Deborah Carroll insisted that we had enough information to write a book. And we totally weren't sure, but she insisted. So we started pulling the information together and decided that we would just rewrite this book by Griggs. And we made a phone call to the National Baptist Laymen's Auxiliary, told them that we had the book, shared with them our passion about hot springs and the things that we wanted to do at the time. And so we got an invitation by the National Baptist Laymen to come to the conference. And so we packed up the car, put in as many books as we possibly could. And that was Janice Kearney, Patricia, Dr. Patricia McGraw, myself, and we headed off to Atlanta. And when we got to Atlanta, my first book. Now, of course, Janet and Dr. McGraw had already written books. They were really heavily researchers with me on this journey to make sure that I got it right and everything. And we laughed and we talked all the way there and all the way back. But what's so funny to me, and I was so excited, was that we sold all the books. So you can imagine I was like on this real, I was on this real high. I was laughing and talking about everything. And it just amazed me because, see, they celebrate, the National Laymen celebrate Mr. Webb every year in January at their winter conference. And they've been doing that since 1924. And when I found out this information and talked to a friend of mine who was pastor at the time at Roanoke Baptist Church, Reverend Massey, he was so excited that I had researched enough to find out that information. I guess, other historians get excited when other historians find information. So in this picture, you see myself standing with Janice Kearney and Dr. Impata and her cousin Elaine Smith there in Atlanta. And this is myself with Harold Simmons, who is the past president of the National Baptist Laymen's Auxiliary. So after reading the book that had been written by Reverend Griggs and going to the conference, we came back, and what we found out was that Mr. Webb had been superintendent of Sunday school for almost 26 years before he passed away. And I think most of you, if not all of you, know the story of Roanoke, and if not, just very briefly here, because he was a member of that church and he passed away in 1946. So it's 1963 that the church burned down, and there was a lot of question, a lot of mystery about the church burning down. Many said that it was bombed because they were heavily involved in social justice and the NAACP and the things that were going on around 1963 in Hot Springs. And it was meant to put a fear and a scare, not only in the people at Roanoke, but the people at Visitors Chapel and the other churches. And when I say people, I have to admit African Americans, and put a scare in them about staying, quote unquote, in their place. But this was not to happen. This picture here shows Dr. Webb as he's getting older. You can see here he's getting older, and we found out through research that he had been quite ill, and some of that illness came because he had been in the Spanish-American War, and there were a lot of things that happened to him during that time that no matter what they did, they just could not get rid of it. I don't know if it was, exactly what it was, but we do know that he went to Meharry Institute, which was one of the premier Black hospitals in the nation during the time that he was living. And this picture is him and the secretary, James Gale. And this is courtesy of the National Baptist Laymen's Movement. It's their Diamond Jubilee edition booklet in 1930. And we give thanks to Elmer Beard, elder and past NAACP member, for giving us that book and allowing that book to be the emphasis of us going to Atlanta to talk to these other men that remembered Mr. Webb and remembered his story, remembered him being at the beginning. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, most of the books that we sold that year went to young men. The National Baptist Laymen's Movement is a movement that believes in preparing our young men for life, preparing them to be young men, helping them with education. They do a lot of outreach, feeding the hungry. In every city that they have a conference, they go in and find out where the people are that have the most need, and they try to fulfill that need with food when they go. And the other part of the layman's movement was to make sure that the pastors of the different churches where the auxiliaries exist are taken care of. And so probably a lot of the names have changed, trustees, deacons, but this is what they do. This is what he put them together for, because he had, and I think there's a story in the book I'll read to you later, that some of the pastors didn't have insurance. They didn't have cars, and a lot of them were riding horses, and things were changing. So in order for them to be the ministers that they needed to be and have what they needed to have to go from place to place, because most of them were itinerant ministers, he was the force behind making sure that they had what they needed so they could perform perform their job as a pastor. So after we came back, we did make them a promise. And the promise that we made to them was that the book only talked about Mr. Webb's life from his birth to 1926, 1927. And we promised them that there was more information regarding Mr. Webb after that time. And so they really did not have that information in any one place. So this again is where Deborah Carroll put the pedal to the metal and insisted that we did have enough. And so what I did was all the research that we had been doing with the help of others, and there's a whole list of people that helped us put this book together. Tony McDowell is one person that I remember, Rhonda Stewart, and to get this book together. And we did it in 2 years and called them back and told them that the book was ready. And so I think we called them, went to a conference, and then while we were gone, we found out, again, Deborah Carroll, that we sent this book over to the Preserve Arkansas and submitted for the Ned Shank Award. Well, we didn't think we were going to get it, but we did it anyway because she kept suggesting it. And in 2014, which was 2 years to the date, we did get the prestigious award from the Historic Preservation Alliance of Arkansas, and it was an award-winning book. And of course, we were very, very proud of that because we realized that Mr. Webb, to many people, is what you would call a hidden soldier, someone that people just have not heard about him, and not even in Arkansas and not even in Hot Springs is the way that we would like to know him. These are some things that we found out about Mr. Webb in reading the book and doing research. He was an entrepreneur and a philanthropist. He was born in September 17th, 1877. He passed away August 30th, 1946. And he was born to an itinerant Baptist minister, Reverend B.L. Webb, who was for many years the moderator of the Baptist Association. Moderator is a very important position. We are very favored here in Hot Springs to have a moderator, Moderator Donald Crossley. That means that they have a jurisdiction over a particular area, and they're the spiritual head to this group in that area, and they come to them for information and and how to operate their organizations. So Reverend Webb was very prestigious, and he took his son with him on a lot of the trips that he went. So John learned very early on what it was to be a good speaker. So he became an entertaining, eloquent, pathetic, and forceful speaker. And Paul and I looked up pathetic. It also means fiery, and forceful speaker, because I was like, pathetic, that doesn't compute. So in 1897, he entered Tuskegee Institute and stayed there until his graduation. He made money to pay his own way through school by working in the town of Tuskegee, by waiting on tables at the Alabama Conference and Female Institute, and by picking cotton. So we know from that he was a man that was not afraid to get his hands dirty. During his stay in the school, he took active part in athletics. He was one of the first first baseman on the Institute baseball team, then its pitcher, and later its captain. He was also quarterback on the football team. When the call came for volunteers in the Spanish-American War, and that was between August 25th, 1898 and August 1899. Sorry for the typo. John Webb was among the first to volunteer. He went to the 2nd Division, 3rd Alabama Regiment, and he was a color bearer for Brigadier General Carpenter. And at the close of the war, he received an honorable discharge at Camp Ship Anniston and returned home and re-entered school. Here's a picture of his father, Moderator Webb. Now, from 1900 to 1903, he was foreman under Major Gardner in the construction of some of the best buildings on the Institute campus. And after leaving school in 1903, he became a contractor in Louisiana, employing a large number of men. He later returned in 1912 to Tuskegee, where he was granted an honorary diploma because of his excellent record of accomplishments. Now, this is another segue. Recently, 2016, Bob Yep, historian and historic window replacement artist, indicated he was working on the Tuskegee Institute campus to restore some of these wooden buildings. And that was really a kind of a big deal because in 2016, Bob Yep came to the historic John Lee Webb house and did a window workshop for people around the state that was put together by our Historic Preservation Alliance of Arkansas. So that was pretty prestigious and pretty much of a historic point for us to be talking to Bob Yap, and he's telling us as he's on his way to Tuskegee Institute to work on buildings that Mr. Webb had a hand in. Now, Mr. Webb worked in Marianna, Arkansas, Clarksdale, and Yazoo, Mississippi, and he built the large part of Phillips, Mississippi. And some of these places, Phillips, we kind of looked on the maps and were unable to find, so we feel that they probably were blended in with other cities around there. So there's still some work to be done. So if anyone is interested, just give us a call because we just can't do everything by ourselves. So we reach out if you like to do research. In 1912, he accepted the position of Grand Lecturer for the Masons of Mississippi and toured the country. And Mr. Webb made his first visit to Hot Springs in 1913, which was the year of the September 6, 1913 fire. Now, the entrepreneurial skills of Mr. Webb moved the Masons of Mississippi, where he paid, excuse the typo, for the Woodman of Union from Mississippi's license. There was a thing called the Smiley Law. And we could tell in some writings, which I will talk to you about later, that they were making so much money within the Black community there in Mississippi, but they were also having a lot of lynchings. So this money was being made, and they came up with a law called the Smiley Law. And the Smiley Law would prevent the Woodmen of Union from opening up any other chapters to their fraternal order. $10,000 had to be paid in order for them to continue growing. And they invited him to speak, and he got up and he spoke, and he was so eloquent, and he offered them the $10,000 to pay for the Smiley Law so they could get their license. And when they did that, they had business in Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Louisiana, Illinois, Florida, Oklahoma, Alabama, DC, Georgia, Virginia, Texas, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Cuba, Maryland, Kentucky, and New Mexico. Now, we're talking a time of segregation, and this kind of money was flowing through the community, and these chapters were being opened up all across America at that time. Now, we talked about him being in Marianna, Arkansas. Well, something special happened to him in Marianna, Arkansas. He found and met this sweet and beautiful young lady. Her name was Carrie Elaine Branson at the time. And again, I'll tell you a little bit more about her family, but she was independently wealthy when he met her. And I don't want to dwell on that too much. I don't, probably didn't matter. I think he was just in love with her. She was beautiful. And so they got married. I know they got married in February, but I cannot remember the date or the year to tell you, but I know it was February, which to me was very heartwarming for them to get married. I found out through oral histories here in Hot Springs from some of our senior oral historians that went to Langston and were alive during the time Mr. Webb was alive, that not only did he speak well, but he also stuttered. Now, you wonder, how could a man be such an elegant speaker with a stutter? But he didn't let that stop him. They said he spoke so well. It was just unbelievable. And so I guess he just swept her off her feet and they got married. And when they got married, this is when he moved her to Yazoo, Mississippi, and then finally Hot Springs. Now, going back to his time with the Masons, the Woodmen of Union, it was in 1915 that Mr. Webb qualified under the laws of the state of Arkansas and secured a charter and began his labors with Arkansas headquarters, which would be, as some of you that are from Hot Springs know, the Woodman of Union building on the corner of Malvern and Gulfer Street. The reincorporators who applied for the new Arkansas charter of the Woodmen of Union were L.J. Winston, John L. Webb, P.W. Clark, W.S. Connor, B.J. Bronson, Mrs. Mary J. Horton, and M.A. Clark. Mrs. Mary J. Horton, from all indications, is the only female in this group, and she is the aunt to Mr. Webb's wife, Carrie. She is her aunt. So that's what has allowed us to draw that there was a financial independence on her part when she married Mr. Webb. And that was very interesting. It took us a while to connect Mary J. Horton to Miss Webb, but she was her niece. In 1923, the Honorable John Lee Webb became Supreme Custodian of the newly built headquarters of the Woodman of Union bathhouse of the Woodman of Union Investment Company's Union National Bank. Well, they did have a bank, and years ago, and somewhere in all of our research, we did have the presence of mind to take a picture of the sidewalk that did say the Woodman of Union Bank. Well, that's gone now, but we did take a picture of it. And so somewhere in our storage unit, we do have pictures of that, which I think will eventually prove to be very important. And there was also the Union Investment Company and the Union Printing Press, all within the Woodman of Union building. Now, Webb became president of the board of directors for the Century Life Insurance Company with headquarters in Little Rock, Arkansas. And you can do some research on that, as we did. It was pretty big. Within 2 days after the organization of the company, its entire capital stock of $200 million was taken. And within a few months, it had $900 million worth of insurance in force in 3 states. So that's a lot of money for anybody. But I will say this to you. I did some research on from the inflation adjustment and what $1,000 then would be worth now. And so I don't have it. I only have it up to 2000, but in 1920, $1,000 equaled $11,700, and that was in, if you multiply that by 2013 when this was done. So $1,000, let me say it again, would be the equivalent of $11,700. So that tells you the kind of money that they were making then. Oh, don't we wish our dollar could go that far today? Ooh, glory. All right. So here is the Woodman of Union in 1926. And these were the men that were behind this fraternal order that had moved from Jackson, Mississippi. On the left, you see the debonair John Lee Webb, who is considered the supreme custodian of the building. And next in the back behind him is Dr. Joseph H. Barabin. And next to him with glasses is Dr. John E. Eve. And on the left with the other hat is Dr. Ellis A. Kendall. And you'll see the picture there of the Woodman of Union, and you see the planes flying above. That usually means that the card itself was made and passed out at a specific time, which would celebrate the life of that particular organization. And this is the Woodman of Union building in 1926. And this picture was taken from the Triumph of the Simple Virtues, or the life story of John Lee Webb, in 1926. I found this very interesting. These are, if we were doing resume for Mr. Webb, these would be his references. And it's pretty, it's a pretty full list. And I'm very sure that there are names that are missing. Bishop Hamlet with the CME Church. You have the National Baptist Convention. You have Pastor Joseph T. Hill, who is pastor at Roanoke Baptist Church, where Mr. Webb spent all of his time. Then C.C. Spalding, who was president of the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company. M.A. Lewis, Afro-American Insurance Company president, the Grand Commander of the United Supreme Council of Masons, Mr. R.L. Pendleton, and Fred R. Moore. Some of you may have recognized his name as publisher and editor of the New York Age. And then you have the National Negro Business League. He was a part of that. And Dr. Robert R. Mouton, who was president of Tuskegee Institute at one time. And Emmett J. Scott, Secretary of Howard University, Mr. Bell, Mr. Howard, Mrs. Booker T. Washington gave a very nice reference about Mr. Webb's work and her husband's thoughts and feelings about Mr. Webb. And of course, Dr. Mary J. McLeod Bethune, Alfred Cherokee Charlie, the governor of the state of Arkansas, the Honorable Thomas Chipman McRae, and C.J. Horner, and Harry Jones, mayor of Hot Springs, Arkansas, just to name a few of the named people that he came in contact with during his time. And again, this is just a very short list. Here is the inside of the Woodman of Union bathhouse. This would have been in 1926, and this is the reception area for the bathhouse. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this would be on the Garden Street side of the building. You know, there's the front side, which is on Gulfer Street, facing Malvern, and this would have been on the other side, which would be Garden Street. That would be the entrance into the bathhouse. This shows the Woodman of Union. It's called From the Relief Department. This was taken also from the book. Basically, what you have here is free. They got free hospitalization. So this was what was part of the insurance program that they had with the Masons. Now, of course, we have to keep in mind all this money and everything that was being spent. It was all being spent in a certain area. Like in Hot Springs, it was a certain 8-block area in any direction where African Americans were living. All around the country, it was the same way, and it's because of segregation. So we couldn't get insurance. So the Masons, or the fraternal orders, were the ones that got insurance so that people could be buried, and they would not have to have this heavy responsibility on their families to bury people. So this made being a Mason and being a part of what they were doing very important, so that you could have insurance for your family. This is something they thought of back in the day. So after he got the Whitman built and everything was happening, he moved his family to Hot Springs, Arkansas. And this is the historic John Lee Webb house, where they lived their lives between 1923 and 1954. And I think I do believe his wife was the last one to pass away. I think the aunt, Miss Horton, passed away 2 years before Miss Webb. I think she was the last one to pass away. And so there, you'll find there's burial sites out at Greenwood and a mausoleum there. So now we know what happened over time in 2014. We know this is what the house looked like, and that Phoebe was given the house by Patricia Perrin to go in and see what we could do with the house. She trusted us when nobody else would. There are people that gave us money that really didn't trust that we were going to be able to do anything with the house. So we hope that you will pass this on and encourage people that sometimes you don't have to be very big, but you do have to be determined. And so this is the house, the way it looks. We're bringing it back up in May of 2019. Work is being done as we speak this summer, and we're going to finish off the north side of the house and the bricking. And this house not only has the roof that you can see, but it has 3 roofs in addition to that. So it's actually a 4-roof house. And so we'll get those done in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then we'll be doing the work on the bricks and making sure that the house has the same bricks on the front, the back, the east, the west, the north, and the south, so that it'll be up to par and looking very much like it did when Mr. Webb and the Huggaboom family that lived in it before Mr. Webb were living there. It did change a little bit between the Huggabooms and when Mr. Webb moved in, but basically the structure is similar, the same. Now, this is the Pleasant Street Historic District. When you look on the National Trust page and you look up Pleasant Street Historic District in Hot Springs, Arkansas, you will see that it also has another name, and it's also known as the John Lee Webb Historic District. And the reason being is these houses that you see and the bricks and everything, we found that Mr. Webb wanted to make sure that everybody that worked in the Woodman of Union building, that everybody that worked there lived within walking distance of the job so that they could get to work on time and that they could operate efficiently, which they did. So once again, I'm going to, at this time, take a few minutes and I'm going to read a few excerpts from the book from John Lee Webb, The Man and His Legacy. And so there we go. So you're gonna see me and the top of my head now. Okay, Paul.
Yeah. We're ready.
Okay. All right, here we go. This is a dedication page, and so I'm going to try to read and look at you at the same time so that you don't see really the top of my head all the time. I love to read, so hope you'll find this very interesting, the information. Now, the dedication page is important because we thought you should know exactly how this, how it really plastered itself in our hearts and our minds. Dedication page. I thank God as I dedicate this book to my mother, Hosietta Wilson. It was her encouraging words that started this avalanche of oral histories and photographs. Her words were, honor them, honor the seniors, because they are not honored as they should be. And we did. Thus, to those words and the group of people that have become affectionately known as the Garland County Council of Elders, we honor and dedicate this book to them because they sat for an hour and told us their oral histories, bared their emotions, and shared their photographs. Some of the elders told us oral histories about their parents and grandparents who spoke in whispers about the trials and accomplishments of a people who, without education and writing abilities, built churches, homes, and schools. It was the memories of these 80 or more senior adults that laid the foundation for people helping others excel by example and the Uzuri Project. In 1997, this project was not an oral history project on film. It was an answer to the slaves and sharecroppers that cried out to make sure that their stories were told. That we should not forget who they were, where they lived, the homes they built, the churches they attended, and the places where they sought entertainment. The day came when I visited Professor and Mrs. Alonzo Logan. Professor Logan was 86 at the time and a JP with the Quorum Court, and she a retired librarian. My mom went along. It was Old Home Week. They easily went from 1938 to 1968 when Langston High School, the only African American high school in Hot Springs, closed its doors and the schools were integrated. From Grand to Convention down Malvern Avenue, it came alive. The Cameo Club, Miss Kitty's, the Woodmen, the Atmosphere, owned by Leslie Norris, Fane's Liquor Store, owned by Jimmy Fane, Dewey's Barbecue, Lockhart Skating Rink, Rex Humbart, and the Gym Theater, where gospel revivals were held. The Young Jive Bombers, including Clarence Wilson, John Puckett, and Reginald Cravens, and the twins, the Bain brothers. Rusco Bear, also known as Hosier Jordan, and his orchestra entertained people of all colors in the red big building called the Casino on the corner of Guffa and Laurel. Professor Logan, right before my eyes, was a young man with his new bride at his side, laughing and remembering, excited. I had come only for the photographs of them and the newspaper articles. I got so much more. It was birthed in my heart, and I sold the idea to as many that would listen. Videotape the experience, see and touch history. But to whom should the idea be sold? Not just us old folks, but the future, our young people. Dr. Martin Luther King said it best: unique leadership, being able to use the wisdom of those who are older and the energy of those who are younger to accomplish a goal. Teams win. Individuals don't. So I thank God for the passion and the constant revealing of the purpose of my life to tell their stories. The idea of putting the old and young together brought about so many years of filming the Black history of Hot Springs. All we did was ask the seniors to remember when, and they forged ahead. Well, this has been a team effort, people helping others excel by example. And they say if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. I was horrified by that. So we've written it down because it did happen, and we dedicate their memories in the pages of this book. We ask that you handle them carefully, speak them factually and articulately, and do remember them. Chapter 1, Hot Springs National Park, Arkansas, home of Mr. John Lee Webb. Mr. Webb made his first visit to Hot Springs in 1913, which was the year of the September 6, 1913 fire, Black Friday. The fire broke out on Church Street, a few blocks southeast of Bathhouse Row near the Army and Navy Hospital. The fire burned southeast away from the hospital until the wind reversed an hour later. Much of the southern part of the city was destroyed. Damage was estimated at $10 million across 60 blocks. Was the potential that Mr. Webb had seen one of the reasons that he decided to come to Hot Springs? The community, both Negro and white, had been left with a tragedy that put everyone on a level playing field. One thing was for sure: there was an openness to all people who wanted to work, start businesses, build homes, and send their children to school. It is clear that in 1919, winds of change were making their way to Hot Springs, Arkansas. This wind had hit the United States in the form of Negroes, colored people who were educated, industrious, inventive, and creative, and many had become philanthropists. The Honorable John Lee Webb, Supreme Custodian, a contractor, was one such a one. He was the visionary of the historic Woodman of Union building, also known as the National Baptist Hotel in Hot Springs, Arkansas, which became a part of those winds of change. We are inclined to believe that the winds of change, among other national transformations, was carried by the fraternal orders. These organizations became the embryonic insurance companies as we see them today. In an article in Ebony magazine, October 1997, it was documented that between the years of 1870 and 1920, $168 million was contributed to fraternal orders. They built communities, churches, businesses, and hospitals, and were involved in other entrepreneurial endeavors. In 1918, when John Lee Webb returned to Hot Springs as a part of the Winds of Change, he came knowing that it was a place that had catered to Negroes since 1863, where they had owned their own businesses, bathhouses, and churches. It was a tourist destination for the good, the bad, and the ugly. He knew without lynchings every day, he could make a place for Negroes to come, bathe, gamble, attend fine churches, build and buy homes, establish a place where his people could become a part of a strong, stable community. He came quietly, but with a big plan and with a large amount of that $168 million of fraternal money. John Webb chose to build one of the most prestigious and architecturally sound buildings in the South, the Woodman of the Union building, WOU as they called it. The work began in 1923, and by 1926, it was finished at the cost of $500 million. Don't forget, $1,000 during that time was like $11,700 now, or in 2013. You could not help noticing the tenacity of the people during that time. They were a people of a different breed. Their lives would be filled with hardships and letdowns, but they kept getting up. This notion was further impressed in my spirit in 2002 by a quote in a letter directed to Gene Wallace, Hot Springs Park and Recreation, from one of Hot Springs' most recognized and loved historians, Marcus Phillips, Trail Keeper, 1915 to 2007. Quote, the area of Malvern Avenue, Pleasant, Gulfer, and Church Streets, with its development of churches, hotels, bathhouses, businesses, a bank, a theater, and offices of the highest professions, was a monument to African American achievement in culture, thrift, and enterprise. Here was a community that sprang up overnight, reaching its fullest expression in the 1920s and continuing on through the years, setting an example of what a people can achieve. The area included Mr. Webb's home, the homes of his contemporaries, Dr. John Edward Eve, Supreme Medical Director of WOU, Dr. Ellis Albert Kendall, Sr., Supreme President, WOU, and Dr. Joseph F.H. Barabin. All of these men became a part of the winds of change that swept not only Hot Springs, but also our nation. In an attempt to save the legacy of the Honorable John Lee Webb, Supreme Custodian, WOU, the neighborhood in which he lived and had partially built, was nominated and accepted by the National Trust for Historic Preservation and placed on the National Register of Historic Places. There had been a question, why build in Hot Springs? This is what we found. This is the heart of the matter. Welcome to our state and city, Hot Springs, the Wonder City. Hot Springs may be justly called the City of Wonders, highly elevated, surrounded by the beautiful Ozark Mountains. It reminds one of the beautiful city of Jerusalem that David spoke of when he reflected over the gigantic hills that surrounded Jerusalem, which was but an emblem of God's strength and everlasting protection. Cried out, I look to the hills from whence cometh my support. It can truly be said that Hot Springs, beautifully situated as she is, surrounded by these beautiful mountains, bubbling forth their wonderful water cure, is a city favored with the smiles of Providence. The Indians knew of the hot springs of Arkansas long before the white man. He knew of the medicinal properties of its hot waters. His entreaties still linger in the ears of the visitors. Take and be healed. Bathe and be young. The Great Spirit gave it to us. Over 200,000 visitors come here annually for treatment. The baths are beneficial to all who partake of these waters. This has given hot springs a worldwide fame. Colored schools. The school system here among the finest in the country. We have the Langston High School with 18 teachers and the Douglas and Oakland graded schools. They consist of a core of well-trained teachers who are doing excellent work. In fact, Hot Springs produces what might be called a model system of education, and her buildings are much to the pride of her citizens. Professor Uriah McKenzie is the superintendent. Relations between white and colored. The best of feelings exist between the white and colored citizens. There's no place in the United States where a more friendly and harmonious relationship is portrayed. This was written by George S. Washington, Woodman of the Union, in a 1926 souvenir program that is stored at the Garland County Historical Society archives. I want you to think about what I just said and the way that it read. Again, this is from the 1920s and the 1930s, when they write a lot differently than we write today. And I wanted in the book, I wanted it to be read. I wanted it to be printed exactly the way they said it. I didn't want to change anything. So this is how Mr. Washington wrote about Hot Springs. And I also think that the way that he wrote it, now, I think that he wrote it that way too, because we have 2 documented lynchings in Hot Springs, and everybody knows that's too many. However, when you think about moving the headquarters from Mississippi to Arkansas, where in Mississippi lynchings were not being happened every single day, it seems like to me the writing is being said to encourage African Americans that it's okay to come to Hot Springs and visit, that it's okay to come to Hot Springs and look for a place to live. That's me, but that's the way that I read that. Now, this will be more of Mr. Griggs' writing. I love his writing. Although engaged in the giant task of building a fraternal organization himself, yet he has connected himself with every other general organization of a like character to be found in the state of Arkansas. He is a member of the Pythians, the Odd Fellows, Masons, Mosaics, the Juggamos, and so forth. A crying need of the race, as Mr. Webb has seen the matter, is opportunity for the employment of our educated young people. In order to help meet this need, he has ever stood ready to help every Negro enterprise that has presented its case to him with the proper endorsement. Although some of these enterprises that appear to be very promising have not as yet paid any dividends, he has continued to take stock in others. And what Reverend Griggs was saying here is that being a leader, he was always excited and wanted to encourage other businesses to grow. He didn't stand in their way. Even though they may not have worked out, he did try to help them in some kind of way. And I think that's something that maybe we have forgotten to do over the years, and that is to reach out and try to help someone when they have their mind set to try to do something, because you just never know. Mr. Webb is a liberal donor to the Roanoke Baptist Church, of which he is a member, and gives regularly to all the organized work of the Baptist denomination with which he is affiliated. He has contributed $5,000 to the endowment fund of Tuskegee Institute. He also contributed to the Athletic Bowl Fund and to the fund to Tuskegee Institute. He has contributed it to the Athletic Bowl Fund, which to present Professor R.R. Morton, principal of Tuskegee and president of the National Negro Business League, with an automobile. He also gave $1,000 toward the erection of a hall at the Arkansas State Fair at Little Rock in honor of the Arkansas Negro soldiers who lost their lives in the World War. Not only does Mr. Webb give himself, but he stimulates giving on the part of the organization of which he is the head. The Woodmen of Union have an educational fund amounting to thousands of dollars annually, which is presented to various institutions of learning in several states. If what we have said of Mr. Webb is true, then it seems that those associated with him in various ways would also have made the discovery of these splendid traits. That is exactly what has taken place. He is the president of the Negro Insurance Men's Association, National Baptist Laymen's Convention, Arkansas Baptist Laymen's State Convention, president of the Negro Business League of Arkansas, first vice president of the National Negro Business League, deputy grand master of the Grand Lodge of Masons of Mississippi, treasurer of the Tuskegee National Alumni Association, and supreme custodian of the Woodman of Union. So, I believe that what I wanted to do was to lay the foundation why we are so excited about the man, John Lee Webb. He married a woman who was not afraid to give of her own finances to build the Webb Community Center in honor of their daughter, Emma Elise Webb, who died at a very early age of 33 of ovarian cancer. We do talk a little bit about her story in the book, and since then we've done more research about her, and there's still more to do. So of course, if there are people who are interested in researching, please let us know. We definitely know there's more to be told to the story. But as we come to the end of our time today, I did not want to go over. I'm surprised I've done this well. I was so excited. I'm glad I didn't mark the whole book to read to you. We know that Mr. Webb died August 30th in 1946. And he was buried, as I said, with his wife, daughter, and the auntie at Greenwood Cemetery. Without going into a lot of other things, they said that when he died, this was the poem that was read and that was written in his obituary. So I leave you with this. The bridge builder. An old man going along the highway came at the evening cold and gray to a chasm vast and deep and wide. The old man crossed in the twilight dim. The sullen stream had no fears for him. But he turned when safe on the other side and built a bridge to span the time. "Old man," said a pilgrim near, "you are wasting your strength building here. Your journey will end at the ending day. You never again will pass this way. You've crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build this bridge at evening tide?" The builder lifted his old gray head. "Good friend, in the path I have come," he said, "there followeth after me today a youth whose feet must pass this way. This chasm that has been as naught to me, to that fair-headed youth may a pitfall be. He too must cross in the twilight time. Good friend, I'm building this bridge for him." Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed our time together. I really wanted to lay a good foundation about John Lee Webb, the Honorable John Lee Webb. the man and his legacy, the people that he touched, people that we can remember, people whose lives sat at Langston and listened to him speak and knew that he was a great man and that his legacy should be forever told. You know, Hot Springs has many, many people. And we discovered that this past Black History Month, when we had many of our founding members, their families got, I don't know, they just got free and started telling their stories. And that was the most exciting time for me, to see them start telling the stories about people that I remember as a young woman growing up. And they started telling their stories with pride and greatness. And that's the way it should be. There are so many unsung heroes in our community that no one talks about. So Mr. Webb is not the only one. There are more. In the coming months and years, I hope that we'll start talking about them and sharing the contributions and the lives and the love and the time that has been spent to make Hot Springs, Arkansas what it is today. Thank you, Paul.
Absolutely. Thank you. Um, I can tell that was you were very, very passionate about this. That was very enlightening and thorough, and I appreciate that. And I want to read off a few viewer comments. They gave you some nice shout outs, so I'll give some to them right back. We had Marsalis Weatherspoon was watching. He says, hello, so glad to be here. And Kimberly said, this is awesome. And Thomas said, thank you. And Janet told you this is a wonderful presentation.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Do you have time for just a few questions before we go?
I do. And I also have a comment. You and I talked about a comment that I forgot to tell everybody about. Remember, and I just completely forgot. I saw the time passing, so I didn't want to take up too much time on that. But
we don't have a time limit on this, and I went 2 hours the other night. So.
Oh, did you? Okay. You want to go back to that so I can share that with them?
Yeah, your PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll pull that right back.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, what I forgot to share with you guys is another discovery. In 2011, research under Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Global Freedom Struggle page exposed these few words. King Jr. was admitted to the college in 1944 following his junior year in high school. As the school enrollment fell with the wartime draft, a friend of King's, Walter R. McCall, recalled King was an ordinary student during his time at Morehouse. He said, I don't think he took his studies very seriously, but seriously enough to get by. Papers 138. King did, however, flourish in other areas, winning second prize in the John Lee Webb oratorical competition in 1946 and 1948. And we know that Mr. Webb did not die until 1946. So you can imagine how my heart leaped with joy to know that just somehow or another, these two great men just, kind of crossed each other's paths. And I can imagine he must have read something about Mr. Webb to find out about the oratorical competition. And also, I had said to everybody that there was a big deal about the Green Book and the freedom of travel, and how Hot Springs had so many homes that were listed on Pleasant Street and other areas around the community. And these were freedom homes. These were homes where you could stay, and Hot Springs wasn't a sundown town, but these were homes that Black people knew they were welcome at. And that was on Pleasant Street. So it was so important that coming up here in July 9th in Hot Springs, there's a virtual tour of the local Green Book locations planned by the Arkansas Historic Program. And I work with them a lot. And the fact that they're going to do this says that we're sitting on top of something really wonderful. So I hope everybody will keep their positive attitude about Pleasant Street, and keep remembering that we just have to plug along, and somehow or another it'll get done. And last but not least, if you want to get a special copy of our book, we got it on sale today, special for $15. And so you can find us on Cash App. You can also find us on Zelle, and you can give us a call at 501 624-9400. That's 501-624-9400. And we'll give you any other information that you may need. Thanks, Paul.
Absolutely. Um, let's see here. Oh, I was gonna say, I just found out about that Green Book tour coming in July today. I was talking on the phone with someone from the national park about booking some programs, and that's actually something we're going to be doing with the library in July. They're going to present about that tour, so I'm sure they'll involve you. That's something I just booked today, so I might have another program with you this summer.
Okay.
So first of all, other than, of course, the book you just talked about, if people were curious about learning more about John Lee Webb or any of his legacy, what would you recommend they do for more information?
Wow. Like I said, he is an unsung hero. I don't really know that there are any more places you can go. Now you can, we did do an article for the Arkansas Encyclopedia, which is under the Butler Center, I believe. And so you can put in the Arkansas Encyclopedia, and there's an article there about him. But any place other than Arkansas, or I have not found any other information on Mr. Webb. That was why it was so important when everything started coming out. I'm like, who hid him? Where was this guy at that nobody heard anything about him? So I have no idea.
Right, and I saw that Arkansas Encyclopedia article the other day, and so I'm sharing that in the comments, the link to
Oh,
that.
great. Thank you.
No problem. And so speaking of unsung heroes, and you alluded to this towards the end there, but are there any other men or women who are prominent figures of local importance to local Black history that you believe don't get their due credit that you would like to mention, or maybe even be interested in writing a follow-up about those figures?
Well, we are talking with the families in the community to talk about family heroes. Hot Springs heroes, people who came to Hot Springs, lived in Hot Springs, and they lived in Hot Springs, and they did many things to promote community. So though I know we're going to be doing something on that, but as far as what you just said, there is a list that Langston keeps, Langston High School alumni, and I'm not sure who's in charge of that list, but there is a list of names of people that have gone on to be very famous, and the list is actually very long. But I didn't expect you to ask me that question tonight, so I don't have it right before me. But I know that there was a gentleman by the name of Mitchell who went on to be very great in football. I know that there was Isaac Thomas and some of the Thomases that they went on to be great football players. And of course, musicians. There's John Puckett. There's Henry Bernard Glover, who changed the face of the music industry. They're going to be doing something about him this summer, this spring coming up on Arts in the Park. And he gets a lot of play on Arkansans with Stephen Cook. Really has a long list of Arkansas musicians. So we do have a lot of Arkansas musicians. We also have Cherokee Charlie, who was named Albert Smith. Albert Smith wrote for the Chicago Daily Defender for years and went on to be a great journalist and started many journalist fraternities that organizations that are still functioning today. He was born over on the Wahoo Trail here in Hot Springs, but they moved to a house on Pleasant Street, right on this corner of Pleasant and Garden. And he lived with his aunt, Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark, who worked with her husband, Dr. Clark, on the Brown versus the Board of Topeka Education, where they talked about the Black children not really Black children not being able to see themselves as wonderful and as great. So she was from our community. You don't hear a lot. You hear a lot about her, but not a lot about the fact that she was born here in Hot Springs, and her nephew also. And there's who else? See, my mind is drawing a blank. There, let's see. You have Charles Butler, who graduated at the University of Illinois. You have Cornelius Bob Mitchell, who was excellent record in football at the University of Illinois, and at one time he was playing with the Cleveland Browns. Dr. Janet Eve, daughter of the late Dr. John Eve. Dr. H. Phillips Jr., graduate of Meharry Medical College. Captain Torrance Jr. Collier, Dr. Edith Irby Jones, the first Negro to graduate the University of Arkansas Medical School, Attorney Barney Putnam, who is a practicing attorney in Detroit, Michigan. So these are all people that came out of Hot Springs that you don't hear a lot about. There's also a Judge Timothy Evans in Chicago, Illinois. Let's see. Well, that's about it. I'm sure somebody out there is going to say, well, you should have said, well, hey, you get 73, you forget. So anyway, those are the names that I remember that I can, just bring up off the top of my head.
That's a good list of homework to get people started if they want to do more research. Yeah. And if you want to email me that list, yeah, I'll put that in the comments too after the video. Which okay. By the way, this is recorded, so if anyone wants to share this on Facebook or YouTube, you'll be able to share for others to watch as well.
Okay, that'd be good.
So, was it a challenge getting Pleasant Street recognized as a historic district?
Well, it wasn't a challenge with the people like on a state level. And it wasn't a challenge on a national level. They came in, they saw the area, they recognized what it was. No one recognized it as a part of the Green Book until recently, but they recognized the architecture of the area. That's what got them going. And so in 2013, it was just the lady that did the work and filled out the paperwork. We also have Historic Visitors Chapel, which is like a hub to the area. They went on the register first, and then they began to look at the rest of the neighborhood and they put that on. I think the hardest thing has been to get our community to recognize that this little small L-shaped area was extremely strategic in America as a whole, especially when you add to it the Green Book and being listed there, and why as children growing up we would go down Malvern Avenue if we could. Most times the girls were not allowed to walk down Malvern Avenue, and at that time we didn't understand why, but the boys could go down Malvern Avenue, and they told us there were cars there with license plates from all over the country, and we were like, well, why are they coming to Hot Springs? Why they coming to Hot Springs? What's so important about Hot Springs? We didn't know at the time what we know now and what we are talking about now. But also there were gamblers and people that came in, from Hot Springs. Like everything in history, if you have the gangsters that emanate from Italy and in the white community, then you have the policy kings that emanated out of the Black community. And the policy kings did things a little bit differently than the mafia, but they were Black. And so you had them that came to Hot Springs every other year that bought their conference. Then you had the National Baptists that bought their conference, every year. So you had all this influx of people coming in from all across the country. And for the most part, until I say 1964, 1968, I never heard an Arkansan with a Hot Springs Black person with a Southern accent. When I returned and I was talking to people, they had Southern accents. The older people in Hot Springs did not have Southern accents. I didn't have a Southern accent when I left. And it was because we had such an influence of Black people that came in, and we are a people that adapt. And so we had our own environment. We were not necessarily going to school with white people. We didn't pick up their Southern dialect. until we started to go into school with them. Okay, so all of these things, came together to make a very unique tapestry of what Hot Springs was like and was like at that time.
Thank you. Very thorough answer, which I appreciate. You talked quite a bit about how active Mr. Webb was in the effort to help people who are struggling or in need. And I know you're very involved in that yourself. It's something you're passionate about. Can you share some of those resources so that viewers can know some options they have if they're fortunate enough to be able to contribute to those efforts? And Marsalis asked a similar question: how can people contribute?
Okay. Oh, people can. I said earlier that people can, if they want to contribute to the work that we're doing with Phoebe. We do have Cash App. We do have Zelle, and they can write a check and make it out to Phoebe and tell us in the corner, do you want the money to go to the youth project? Do you want the money to go to the Webb House? How do you want us to disseminate your donation? And you can send that to our P.O. box, which I hope that you'll put that in, as we go on. I'll give that to you again to put in the chat box for people that are interested. And that's one way. But there are other organizations that people can get involved in if they're interested in social justice and seeing things happen and have concerns and want to be involved with making sure that people get the shots regarding the COVID-19 shots and stuff. I think the NAACP, of which Marcellus Witherspoon is president, is a good place to start there. To talk with them and find out about that. I think that if you want to get involved and know more about the health and the welfare of African Americans and find out about high blood pressure and, that kind of thing, I've noticed that the difference makers are really pushing that kind of thing, where you can get involved with that so that you can find out more about, diabetes and the things that affect the African American community. And then you have organization called Raw Cycle. Raw Cycle is a new organization. If you know senior citizens that are living by themselves, and let's say they can't cut their grass, because they're in a wheelchair, single woman or man or something, Raw Cycle would be the people that you would call about that. You can also call the city of Hot Springs and tell them that you have a senior person that needs to have their grass cut, and they'll put them in touch with Raw Cycle. And Raw Cycle also has a Facebook page. So I know that they do that. They help the seniors in that way. And let's see. Then you have other organizations like the Gateway. Gateway is huge. Gateway Community Association is far bigger and has more responsibility to the community than Pleasant Street Historic District. Pleasant Street Historic District is primarily interested in making sure that we remained a historic district, that we can influence and get money into the area so that nothing changes, so that people can see what the area looked like back in the 20s and the 30s. That's our main thing, is to maintain that. But the Gateway Community Association, the way I understand community associations, is to be interested in the bigger part of community. And so if you're interested in the bigger part of community and making sure that people, the sidewalks are done, making sure that the lights are working, that kind of thing, that, encompasses, community associations. Now they work together. They do work together because the Pleasant Street is right in the middle of Gateway, but there is a difference in their vision, in their focus, I would say. Gateway has a larger focus than Pleasant Street, But those are some of the organizations. I know there's that I know about that people can get involved in and based on their own like.
Excellent. We got one last comment I'll read off from Claudia. Such a wealth of information. I enjoyed this live video. Thank you for your constant dedication and commitment you have placed in the history of Hot Springs. Blessings to you always.
Oh, okay. Now, Claudia, she's one that can fuss at me. Now, do you know her father was Reginald Cravens? And Reginald Cravens was the one of the top musicians. When I was mentioning early on about Professor Logan and his wife talking about the people that made Hot Springs what it was when they were young and everything, Reginald Cravens would have been a part of that. Her father is absolutely one of the great musicians, along with John Puckett. And he played for years at the Arlington Hotel and that kind of thing. And I believe also that their home is on the, I don't know, the Arkansas or the National Register because of the contributions that her dad made. So shout out to you on that, Claudia. I didn't call your dad's name, but I'm gonna give him props right now. And you know, and I thank everybody that's at home cleaning their house and getting ready to eat dinner for watching.
Yeah. I think all these people are just buttering you up for some reason. No, you did great. I will read one more comment since
Sure.
Biddy, such an interesting program. Could you repeat how we can buy your book again?
Okay, you can buy our book, and I'm ask Paul to kind of put that into the chat. You can send your check made out for $15 to Phoebe Publishers, and then put it in the mail to Post Office Box 363, Hot Springs, Arkansas. And of course, make sure you put your phone number or something, your name in there, so we can call you. We're going to save you on shipping and handling. That's why it's 15. So you're going to have to call us, or we can call you, so we can kind of drop the book off and save you on shipping and handling.
Do you
Because if
still
we
have
have
your
to mail it to you, it'll be more.
you still have your PowerPoint open? If we can put that last slide up too, and I can
Sure.
take a picture of that. It might be easier.
Okay.
There we go.
There you go.
All right. Well, I'll add that to the chat here in just a moment.
Okay.
Biddy says, "Thanks so much. Can it be picked up at P.H.O.E.B.E?"
Okay. Oop. Okay.
She wants to know if it can be picked up.
Just they have to call us first.
Okay.
Yeah, just call us first. That's all. Because we're not, you know, we put everything into the house, so we don't have a little facility right now. So just call us and tell us when you want the book, and we'll work it out for you. And that number again is 501-624-9400.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Batts. It was a great presentation, and thank you everyone for watching. And remember, you can share this video. As soon as we end the broadcast here, there will be a file saved in our videos tab on Facebook and YouTube. Sometimes there's a delay, but it should be up on our YouTube channel tomorrow as well. So whichever way you prefer to watch. And I hope to have you back again in the future for another program.
I'd be delighted to come back, Paul, for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you have a good night, and
You too.
everyone watching.
Bye, everybody.